Welcome to episode 5 of Law That Leads. In this episode, we are highlighting our innovative approach to the intersectionality between business and real estate law, especially our practices here at ALF. For those of you that are just tuning in, I am your host, Paula Becci, and today we have a very special guest with us. Tharshan Ilangovan is a senior portfolio manager and wealth advisor with RBC. Tharshan has been assisting high net worth families, business owners, and medical professionals for approximately 2 decades now, where he takes a more holistic approach to investment management. Tharshan understands that business is not just about managing money, it's about people, and something that we understand very well here at ALF. Being entrusted with the responsibility to help shape his clients' financial futures is something that Tharshan takes very seriously. His credentials speak for themselves as he has achieved some of the most prestigious designations in the industry, including the Chartered Investment Manager and the Advanced Investment Advice. This allows him to conduct discretionary portfolio management services on behalf of our clients, along with specialization in high-level investment strategies. Without further ado, please help me welcome Tharshan. So Tharshan, tell us a little bit more about what you do on a day-to-day basis. We understand you're very heavily involved with wealth management and estate planning. Maybe you can just go back a step a little bit and try to discuss the importance of estate planning and the intersectionality between estate planning and wealth management strategies that you use on a day-to-day basis.
Great question. I think part of it is when people think of family offices, it's a pretty vague area, even though predominantly discretionary investment management is what we do, but we do understand the importance of quarterbacking relationships for entrepreneurs, business owners, and professionals. Now, it's very important to us to network to center of influences for our clients, like accountants and lawyers like yourself. Predominantly, even though we focus on investments, but the structure of their families and their businesses is very crucial. And in today's world, focusing on what you do very best is in real estate law. That topic, it seems to be something that we see popping up, throughout our clients.
Yeah, and I guess with us, we also practice family law, which in it, there's a lot of professionals that are going through the division of assets section, I guess, if the family is now separating. So if you were to develop a plan when they first come to you and now there's sort of a pivot plan, do you plan for that in the beginning or would you approach it as it comes?
So when we deal with families, we really take it back a few steps. We make them understand there's really 4 quadrants to their affluential plan. So investable assets being one, real estate being second, we call it private equity, which is really their own business or investing in someone else's business, and insurance really being the fourth. Now, the reason we do that is really for them to understand each segmentation and how they work together and the risks that are involved with each of those segmentation and how do you mitigate those risks going into their future. So on that topic, family law is huge. Mitigating risk before, for example, marital contracts, explaining the importance of why someone should have a contract in place previous to getting married versus inheriting assets after the wedding.
And how does that change if someone does not have a prenup prior to the date of marriage? How would that change if now they decide to do a postnup, which is a little bit of a recent trend?
Right. So the real question really is, people have to ask themselves, when you do engage into a marriage without a marital contract, which is known as prenup, even though it has such a ugly connotation to it, but you got to think of it this way. It is true, when you marry someone, you're marrying their family, but you're also marrying into their business, right? I think it's fair to say nobody wants my wife to be their partner if I wasn't in the picture. So taking that into consideration, and if you understand that in those contents, then having a contract really is about, solidifying that relationship that you meant to have with certain people.
Correct. And I guess that would also bring us to the next part of you do this day to day and you're advising families on a daily basis, or people that are about to create a family already have a very established business prior to doing so. So I guess in addition to the estate and family planning, you would also be doing a little bit of business planning.
Yes.
Or if business partners are now supposed to be added or taken off, how does that come into play?
So it's very a normal thing for humans to go through different emotional factors. There's always that honeymoon stage, and then there's the realism stage, and then there's the consequences stage. With all of this, I think what we're trying to get people to understand is the importance of having shareholders agreement, right? So in our practice, we do have our in-house family lawyer and a tax lawyer. But however, the part of the reason why we believe in having our own lawyers on the team is to give our clients the opportunity to understand these risks. But it really manifests when we bring them to someone like yourselves or your partner Anissa in family law, and really we're giving them a sort of a foresee probability issues that may arise in the future, and we're really mitigating those factors today.
And when someone first comes to you, what is traditionally the first piece of advice that you give them?
The first piece of advice I usually give them is to review your current structure.
Okay.
Let's review your wills in your state, your business org charts, and I personally like to understand how much they actually understand, and because it's with our clients, it's always about, it's not how much they make today, it's how they're going to transition the wealth to the next generation. And it's about the relationships they're going to have with their partners. It's about forecasting and preventing the future issues they may have with their partners or even family members, right? So it's really about mitigating risk. It's about amount of due diligence we can put today to prevent the probability of positive outcomes in the future.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I think when people first come to us as well, we always take the time to understand what the current situation is as well. And of course, lawyering is all about mitigating risk. But I think a lot of people, when they first come, they don't necessarily see it as let's mitigate risk. It's always, how can I do this?
Yeah, it's a human tendency to not think about consequences of negative outcomes, right?
Yeah.
In the perfect world, we will never have negative outcomes, but unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. So one thing I always tell clients is that you can't really plan for everything, but it doesn't mean you don't plan for anything, right? And we see that a lot with a lot of families who don't want to talk to their kids about transitioning well to the next generation. Or even, don't know how to approach subjects like marital contracts. Or I even have clients who's been in business with someone for 20 years and really do not want to engage into that conversation of shareholders agreement. But I can definitely tell you this, and this, I'm preaching to the choir telling you this, is that almost 90% of all those clients will have to face those conversations. And so the way I bring it around is, look, we identified it. These are your outcomes, but let me pull in a professional who can actually bondify that, put it on paper. Because the second you put it on paper, it actually changes. Actually, what I found is it actually solidates the relationship better. A lot of times our clients don't want to bring up partnership agreements with their partners because they're afraid of how they would interpret that. But what they seek to understand is they're thinking the same thing and they don't want to approach to you.
Obviously, we agree on this.
Yeah.
But it's always important to have that conversation, because the earlier you have it, now you know what the other person's reaction is.
Right.
And you're sort of preparing based on these things the conversations that have already taken place.
Yes.
While everybody's happy.
Yeah, so we actually have a different take on it. So what we tend to do is we tell parents all the time, do not bring up marital contracts with your kids, because it comes across very unbiased, right? Or biased at times. But with us, when people hear from professionals, there isn't a bias. It's just what we do. So you being a lawyer, for you to bring up certain things, there's nothing to be kind of pinned to. There's no hidden agenda on your, for you to bring up these probabilities of issues in the future, right?
Yes.
But I see that the chemistry changes if it's personal and say your sister-in-law brings it up.
Right.
Or your mother-in-law brings it up. So there's an art in how you say it. I think with someone like
Correct.
yourself and I, we have the license to say it.
Wholeheartedly agree with you. And it does sound different when it's a family member or someone emotionally tied to you.
Yes. I've seen situations where they came, clients, partners came to me with a whole bunch of different notations of how they interpret a certain situation.
Yeah.
And after sitting down with us and after explaining to them, they all seem to agree on the same variable, right? I think like I'll give you a small example, like shareholders agreement. I think it's the funniest thing, right? Me and you, we decide to go out on a venture and open a business. We're in this honeymoon phase where we're fully creative and we don't want to talk about what if you die.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is, you probably thought it. Somebody probably brought it up to you. You just don't know how to bring it up to me. So
At that point in
with
time.
our family office service, it's something that we deliberately, bring to our clients' attention. And while they're sitting down with me or Robin, who's the lawyer on my team, there's no bias to it.
Right.
It's what you do, and then that's stage one. Stage two, you need to put it on paper, and this is where it's we encourage our clients, and majority of the time they don't have a relationship with accountant or lawyer to put these things into
Right.
practice, and this is where it's great for us to network with young professionals like yourself, because believe it or not, you're actually adding so much value to their business, and you're mitigating a lot of risk.
I'm sure. And you've been doing this for quite a long time. So
18 years, yes.
yes, so that's a very long time to see how the industry is changing, what the new trends are, or sometimes just repeating. So a lot of what you do, would you say, is closely connected to the economical environment that we're
Oh, 100%.
So how do you find this unique environment we're in and how
Yeah.
that's affecting what you do?
One thing about our industry, or just in general, is that it's different every time, right? But I could tell you that it was, for the last 41 years, we had the luxury of living in what we call a disinflationary environment. And just to kind of break down what that actually means is, when you're printing money, when government policies are all, suited for creating jobs, and you're cutting rates to zero, and even there was talk about going into negative rates, which we're not going to get on to that conversation here, but what it really did is gave people fake hope, right? So what I mean by that is that we live in the principle of economical system where you're supposed to be able to maintain a certain lifestyle by being able to afford it based on what you earn. But being in a disinflationary environment, it really, changed the definition of that. It meant that you were able to borrow something, like to give you basic numbers, like someone who were able to access a line of credit for $1 million was basically servicing it for $13,000 a year. The same person today would have to spend about $85,000. So the difference is
Not a little difference.
it's dramatically, right? Because it has to come from somewhere.
Right.
And the problem is that person for the last 41 years believed that they were able to leverage and overextend. But the reality is the economical system was never made for that. So we're in what we call an inflationary environment where the playbook has actually changed. And I call it personally, the word I created is repricing. Repricing is the ability to understand reality and connect, your cash flow to what you can actually sufficiently manage, right? And saying that, this is where I think it's more crucial for a lot of people to reach out to you. It's because let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is real estate, right?
Yeah.
And the problem before was you couldn't, builders, no offense to them, they couldn't go wrong before, because for every one purchases, there's 50 waiting, right? Now the
Correct.
problem is completely other way around, where the banks have tightened their lending policies. They do not want to be able to be caught with someone else's liability. So what they're really doing is they're pushing on stress tests. Like they're going back to builders and asking them to requalify their purchases to see if they can still, have access to mortgage in today's environment. And that's putting these builders in a very highly stressful environment. And the consequences of that is that they may not close on the properties. So as a purchaser, you have to ask yourself now, you put this deposit down, and we were chatting about this a little earlier before, and now, yes, they have some level of insurance on it, but you're dealing with few cases where it's now 8 cents on the dollar, right?
Correct.
So how does that make one feel comfortable in this environment to put their hard earning deposit down to purchase something, knowing the problem is the builder may not be able to build it?
Right.
In fact, stretch it, or in fact, bankrupt it.
Right.
Right?
And go through insolvency proceedings.
I know I sound very negative, but someone has to create contrast, right?
It's really funny because when you do what we do, you're always thinking of the worst case scenario and preparing for the worst case scenario. But you're also in a way saying, let's just put this away and hope it never happens. Whereas people in the happy moments of their life, they're not thinking about that.
Now, when you're buying a home, you're ecstatic. You just put a down payment and you're dreaming about living in this place, starting a family.
About decorating it.
and the problem is you're not thinking of all the things that can go against you, right?
Exactly.
I think it pays for a person to sit down with someone like yourself and understand the spectrum of reality of what might actually happen.
Exactly.
Right? And let's just hope that you prep for all of this and none of it happens. But the truth of the matter is we're in an inflationary environment. And, the data has shown now that CPI, which is a measurement for goods, to see if inflation is coming back. And we are seeing a second spike in inflation. And I hate to say this, but everyone who's running around expecting rates to get cut, if rates are going to get cut right now, it's not for the right reasons. It means we're in a recession. So either way, it's now bad and worse, right? So rates coming down is not because our economy is better. It's because we're in a recession, which means the banks are not going to be lending, which is more problem for the builder. So, and if the builders are building, that means the rates are going to be high. Because technically, if inflation comes back, at very best, they could just leave things they are and not cut it. Hate to say this, but it's like the 4 seasons we have in Canada, right? Where if I was to pinpoint where we are, based on our seasons, we're like in January 18th. And if you're trying to aim for that t-shirt and shorts for July, August, we got ways to go, right? Yeah. So I'm not saying it's not going to get better, but I think people have to reprice. And we saw that with corporations, right? They've restructured by laying off people and managing their capex. Now it needs to come down to household level. I got to get my wife to understand that, no, we're not going to go on 4 trips. We're going to go on 2 trips. How many of us can have that conversation? Until it happens, inflation is not going away.
Right. And I guess the new trend in every industry, regardless of what industry you're in, is, your AI. Is it ChatGPT? Is it helpful to get us through this period and get back to semi-normal?
I mean, yes and no. If you think of AI, it's really to replace human power, right?
Right.
And if that's the case, then we're going to have a lot more. We're going to have unemployment issues. Then we're talking about universal income and all this other conspiracies that we're not going to get into right now. But however, I think AI, it's already embedded into a lot of businesses, and I think Amazon's a perfect example, right? But I mean, I use it at home. Like if I'm traveling somewhere, I get ChatGPT to organize my day for me, right? So while I do think it's an efficient and a positive thing to humanity, but I don't think it's ever going to take the place of this.
Of course.
There's something natural about it. The thing about humans is that we've taken this for granted, and that we need the human interaction. We need to be around people. And I don't think AI will ever replace that. I don't think anyone is going to take investment advice from a ChatGPT or some other AI form, because there's no emotions attached to it. And subconsciously, money to me is a replacement for your time. And someone who is giving me their money is trusting me, and therefore they want that emotional relation. Same thing with you, right? Like people come to you because you are there to solve their problems and protect them and mitigate future probabilities of issues. It's very hard for them to trust a computer to do that. We're not there
For
yet.
sure. And what do you think? Of course, I think that's the drastic end of AI. But in the interim, as it's being developed and,
I think it'll
going
enhance your life.
forward, how does it assist you in what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Right. So for me, remember, I'm an analyst and a portfolio manager, right? So I get bombarded with tremendous amount of data. So collectively organizing data is what AI is actually helping us with. And, we are now creating our own algorithm based on all the macro news we're getting. How do you categorize that into different variables? And then how do you relate that to sectors and then companies? And then how do you assess the value of those companies or intrinsic values of those companies?
Okay.
So for that background work, absolutely. Like I don't need a room full of, employees putting data on Excel anymore. I could get AI to do it. But still processing that data, making sense of the data, and then communicating that data to your client, it's still a human requirement because of emotions. And we saw it too, right? Like there's a lot of hedge fund guys who try to use AI algorithms, it doesn't work. Still need to be overridden. I know like there's a whole range of where AI can possibly be.
Yeah.
I think AI will always be there to support us. I don't think they're here to take our place.
And I agree. In our business, if you were to tell ChatGPT to draft a pleading for
Yeah.
you, you're not going to just print that and send it to the court because
Yeah, but
you're just not going to do that.
but it's more than that. Like I'll give you an example. I may come to you in questioning, what you can do for me with the purchase I may have with the builder that I'm sort of afraid to put a
Yeah.
deposit. But after talking to you, you may have opened the doors to a whole bunch of other things, like introducing me to your colleague Anissa, who may help me with family law and a whole bunch of other stuff, which AI is not capable of, because you're able to do that with your perspective in understanding where my issues are being driven from.
Of
Maybe my issue isn't just to put the deposit down, it's because I may have some family problems that I need to also be protected from.
Right.
Right? So AI can't do that yet. And I don't think
No.
it's ever going to do that because there's the art in reading in the room, reading the person in front of you. I think as human beings, we like that.
There's also different factors. One factor might be detrimental to the strategy that we're building for one specific case. And then even if you have an identical case with the same circumstances, there could be two or more other factors that are now affecting that strategy very differently.
Absolutely.
From another person that is in the same circumstances.
Yeah.
So yeah, the evaluating those sort of things is definitely something that needs the human mind and the human touch.
Yeah.
But I guess in the interim, it's just going to be a matter of utilizing the softwares or utilizing these new developments in AI that, as you said, are just there as a support system.
Absolutely.
But not the end,
No.
all of it, of the conversation and what the strategy should be.
100% agree with you.
Yeah, and I guess you're sort of the first firm I've heard of where you have in-house legal. And
Yeah.
that's setting you apart in the industry.
Absolutely. So I've always learned that when you lead with planning, right? You're really asking the question, what is it really important to the client? Because I could just easily just take your assets and manage it for you, but then I have to ask myself the question, am I justifying it based on what, just returns? Like what if you don't need a 10% return? What if you're good with 4% return? Then am I taking more risk? So really understanding your structure, your purpose and where you need to go from here and how do you want to transition the wealth? Who do you have as a successor for your business? And and there's the other aspects, like do you want to buy your competition? Do you want to sell your business? But without understanding all of that, right? How do I justify just managing your money, right? So I,
course.
for one, love the idea of leading with planning. So I take, so every client, every initial discovery meeting goes into planning. You know, Mr. Client, can I take a look at your current wills, your org charts? Can I review any planning has been done by other professionals? And then based on what we discover, usually 99% of the time, the client will go back to someone like yourselves, whether it's for secondary wills or an update on shareholders agreement or something has to do with the org chart, or then there's tax planning, and that's a whole other beast on its own, right? Which the government keeps changing every other year.
Yes.
But planning, you know, I don't know how much I can emphasize on the importance of planning. And I think for those who are actually listening, I think the one takeaway you do need to get out of this is that, you know, discussing your affairs, understanding your structure with the professional is really a leap in your success.
Of course, we agree with you because even though we're in different industries, the planning and that it's essential. It has to be done because even with us, unless you're planning the legal strategy, you're going to be moving around all the time from your goalpost, and that can't be a good position to be in.
Yeah, you know what I realized? It's a fact. Humans have a tendency to make mistakes, and it's really hard for us to learn from other people's mistakes. And that's why they need people like yourselves and I to really force them to not make those mistakes.
And
right?
listen to what other people's experiences have
Hundred
been and
percent,
learn.
and I'm the first one to admit that I have the exact same problems, right? And but you know, when you're in our industry and you see divorces, you see businesses breaking apart, then you start understanding these things do exist, right? I love sitting down with someone who's just discovered something out of the box and their business is doing great. You know how you relate to an entrepreneur? You ask them about their business, their eyes open up, and you know, time stops, right?
Yeah.
But in the same time, while they're talking to me, you know, I can identify the problems they're going to walk right into, right? And you know, just to give you an idea, the divorce rate in modern world right now is probably 50% or more, right?
It's just nothing to laugh about, but
it's not. But then what does that say about a partnership? Getting into a partnership is a marriage. It's the exact same thing, right? You know, it's a marriage where you live in a different home with your partner, right? But either way, you're going to go through the exact same emotions. So my advice is have your opportunity to sit in front of a professional, have them walk you through the different stages of your business or your family lives and mitigate the probabilities of having issues in the future. And that's the most due diligence you're ever going to do.
and that's very important. And I guess the reason why someone would sit with a professional is exactly like you said with the planning. But then what if something changes in between? And
Yeah.
now you have to pivot from the original planning that you did. And now your client has retained someone like ourselves, our office, or another legal counsel. How or what do you wish there would be part of your communication between you and the common client's legal counsel that would assist in the entire process?
Excellent question. So change is the only constant thing in life. So we all understand that. And we do know that change is something that we should all welcome for better or worse, right? So in our practice, we do review our clients' planning once a year.
Okay.
And we tend to make it a point on ourselves, in our team, to keep an ongoing conversations with our clients' center of influences, their accountants and lawyers. And anytime we discover any change or probability of change, we have no problem reaching out to your firm and expressing what we've discovered and altering their current plan to better suit their needs. So it is really an ongoing service. It's like nobody goes to a doctor once every 10 years or you're about to die. I think there's a reason why you have your annual checkups, right? Like I said, you're not going to prevent everything.
Of course.
But the art is not to prevent everything. It's to prevent as much as you can and be in a position to deal with anything that opposes you or directly challenges you. And you do that by having a great team.
I fully agree with you. And speaking of great teams, I know this about you. You've had the same team that you work with forever.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you were to sort of pinpoint it into what makes you a great leader, what would that be?
I think leaders are born and they're never created. And to me, the way I see it is I build my team based on what I can do for them, right? Something that I personally believed in is that everyone has a certain amount of time in this reality. And, your legacy only lives on from the people that you mentored and influenced. And their success is really, is your success, right? So my team, they're a relatively young team, and I've made it a point to bring them on, teach them everything I know, and my ask is they do it better than I would ever be able to do it.
And what do you think creates that strong loyalty?
It's a give and take, right? I think different things are important to different people, and loyalty is really important to me. So for me, I just focus on what I can do for them, and in return, they do it for the client.
For everybody that's just tuning in, how would they reach out to you and your team?
You can easily just look us up, Ilangovan Wealth Group. We are a division of RBC Dominion Securities. Or even if you just Google my name, Tharshan Ilangovan, I'm sure you can get a hold of us.
Great. Thank you so much again for coming.
Thank you, Paula.
This podcast is brought to you by ALF LLP. Save the 17th of each month for new episodes of Law That Leads. Connect with us on social media for updates and exclusive content. You can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook at ALF LLP.